Welcome to Mac and Bleu, the cutting-edge podcast for the nation's builders, merging the realms of construction with exciting advancements in technology. Join us on a thrilling journey where we delve into the dynamic world of blockchain, AI, the metaverse, virtual and augmented reality, and their transformative impact on the industry. Our engaging discussions span a wide spectrum, covering not only construction, economic development, supply chain, and market segments, but also exploring the vibrant tapestry of diversity within the construction landscape. We shed light on the intersection of local politics and its profound influence on the construction sector, while championing the remarkable contributions of women and minorities in construction. For all things Mac and Bleu, head to www.macandblue.com, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky. Now let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Mac and Blue. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky, president and co-founder of Blue Wave. Today, I'm lucky enough to have Justin Turner on as our guest. He's a broker with Sunbelt Network. We'll get into his background in a little bit. But I have to fall on the sword. I'm laughing my butt off for all of you that have followed me over the years. Look at me. I've got like 4 layers on. Ex-Midwestern guy. It's probably what is it, Ethan? Maybe 40-some, 50 degrees out. And I'm acting like I'm ice fishing 20 years ago. So it pays to get old, right? Anyway, welcome to the episode, Justin. I'm glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So I think we're gonna dive into a bunch of stuff. Justin will explain what he's doing in this space, but off air, we were just commenting that he hasn't been in this space very long, but a career entrepreneur, and he knows a lot of the guests that have been on before. So it was kind of just a nice little evolution and an interweaving of talent and people that we know. So I thought the topic would be appropriate because, help me out, we're going to be looking at business brokerage and things like that today, but you even made reference that Jim Afinowich that was on before. You're going to talk a little bit differently about that, but just to call out to Jim and some other people that might have had similar topics on the show. So with that, Justin, welcome, and we'll dive in. You've probably seen how this goes. The audience always likes to know a little bit about your background, all that kind of stuff. So just, it's not a resume builder, but give us a 10 to 15 minute introduction, if you would, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So Justin Turner. I am an Arizona native, which is rare.
What is that percentage down to now? Is it in the low 20s?
Got to be. Yeah, I mean,
every time more Californians come in, I think the percentage goes down to like the low 20s.
I think it's almost gotten to a point where you're considered a native if you've been here, 20 years or something.
Yeah, but you truly are.
I truly am. Yeah, first generation. So my folks are from Indiana. So my dad graduated from Purdue, and they came out here in the early 80s. So my siblings and I were all born here, and I've been here my whole life except for 2 years in DC. And so I really appreciate Arizona, the weather. I love the heat. I love the mountains, love the desert. Big outdoor guy. So I enjoy rock climbing, and I spend a lot of time out mountain biking when I can. So yeah, born and raised here. I went to Horizon High School, played 4 years of varsity golf.
There you go.
Yeah, played golf since I was 8, so I definitely enjoy that. I don't get out as much as I used to.
Did you get a scholarship?
I didn't get a scholarship. I didn't play college.
Okay.
I was pretty burnt out after high school, and so I just focused on school.
Yeah.
I did 4 years at ASU, graduated with a marketing degree, and found my way into sales after that, and have been selling various products and services and run a couple businesses in the 20 years since then. So
let the audience know the small world story you told me about you and Casey.
Yeah, so you had a guest on about a year ago, I think, Casey Strunk Insurance Group. And so, Casey and I have known each other basically since we were born. Our parents met in Lamaze class, like back when that was legitimately a thing, and that's what you called it. And our parents were friends, and we kind of grew up together. So we were members at Moon Valley Country Club growing up. So we played golf there, did the swim program, and played a little bit of high school golf against each other, and kind of went our separate ways once college hit. He went off to Northwestern, played some golf for them, and all that. But we're both here in the Valley raising families, and so I'd seen him on the podcast and thought, if Casey can do it, I can do it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm not that offensive.
Yeah, exactly.
So, again, let's play a little bit in the background. You said, sales and marketing and things like that. What, all those years doing that, what were the attributes and the things that you gleaned out of those experiences?
Yeah, I think,
I mean, and the reason I'm asking this in the context of how we try to pay it forward on this podcast.
Yeah.
People listen, how it is. We were talking about it off there. when you listen to other podcasts, what do you want to get out of it? So people always want to relate, assimilate, and then learn from either your successes or failures too. So they go, oh, if Justin did this, then I can too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think when you're in sales, and especially if you've sold across various industries and sold various products over the years, you get a feel for how things work across a lot of different industries. And so I've had that. So I feel like, getting into business brokering, you're handling, you're working with business owners of various industries. I don't yet specialize, so I don't only work with XYZ company. So I have to be able to just switch hats all the time. One minute I'm talking to a CPA, the next minute I'm talking to somebody with a manufacturing business, the next minute I'm talking to somebody who does grease trap cleaning. And so,
hey, I can relate to that.
Yeah. So having like this varied sales background has, I think, helped train me to really put on my listening ears, and not go into situations assuming I know everything about their business, because most of the times I don't. So it's very important that I really take time to listen and get a feel for how their business operates, because I can't really help them unless I understand those things. I would say that's the biggest thing. I think also, I've learned how to make deals happen. I think, at the end of the day, as a broker who manages the sell side, so working with business owners who are trying to sell and exit, it's important that we do what it takes to get them top dollar for the business. And so, being able to tap into years of negotiating various transactions and kind of knowing when to hold, when to fold, when to concede, a lot of that's an art form that you learn over time. And so, I just think the varied sales background has given me the skill set to take a business owner and take them from start to finish, in that process of trying to exit a business.
What then most recently, thank you for sharing that, Justin.
Yep.
Most recently, how did you and Sunbelt hook up?
Yeah, so it's interesting, trying to get into various industries. Some I feel like are easier to get into than others. The business broker space is an interesting one in that it's not easy to get into. It's easy to go get your real estate license, which there are 17 or 18 states in the U.S. require that in order to practice as a business broker, you have to have a real estate salesperson's license. And Phoenix or Arizona is one of those states. And so you can easily go do that. But unless you are planning to go off on your own, just hang your license somewhere and just be your own broker, you need to work underneath a more experienced broker, which means you need to find somebody who's willing to take you on as part of the firm. And what I have found is that a lot of brokerages, they're not really looking to recruit and train a staff. They're either just running their own thing, or they're looking to bring people on to hang the license, but you're kind of on your own. So it's interesting. I searched and researched, various firms in the Valley, and I ended up coming across Sunbelt. I gave the managing broker a call. His name's Tim. We had a really good initial conversation, and he was like, once you've got your license and you're ready to go, give me a call back. And there's a spot open for you. So he was willing to, I guess, take a chance on bringing me on. I also fortunately had the benefit of, again, getting into this business. Unless you find someone to mentor you, you just kind of have to figure it out on your own. I had the benefit of finding a gentleman out of Vegas, a guy named Len Crick, actually friends with Jim Mafinowich. That was how I knew of Jim. He had been name dropped by Len. Len was a successful entrepreneur and businessman in the Vegas area for years. And I think sometime in his 40s, he got into business brokering and ran a successful Sunbelt office out there for 20 years. And now he just does coaching.
Oh, wow.
I
assume Sunbelt's national then?
Sunbelt is national, actually international, I believe. So we have the benefit of being, having scale as a franchise organization. Len ran the office out there. And now he said he had a mentor when he was running his business, and his mentor ended up getting cancer or something like that. And before he passed, he said to Len, hey, you've got a lot of knowledge in that brain. You've got a lot you can give. He's like, make sure you get it all out of your head before your time comes. And so Len really
And he
took
took
that.
it to heart, right?
He took it to heart, exactly, and he spent a couple of years literally, releasing all of that information and data that he had, and he put it into one of the more impressive training programs I've ever seen.
Wow.
And now does you can either buy his courses and take them on, kind of self-paced online, or you can do private coaching through them. And so I was like, I'm all in. I did the private coaching, and so it was really good to have a mentor and somebody to really kind of help me learn the ropes, because like I said, at least locally in Phoenix, that's not easy to come by,
Right.
to find somebody who's willing to do that.
So go back, Justin, as you were telling, and thank you for the story. As you were saying that, I kept going. What was the what's the word I'm looking for? What was the event that happened, let's say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in your mind that said, I want to go into business brokerage? Help the audience understand the connection of where you were, sales marketing, those years of successful over here, and then going, hey, this is what I want to do next.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so my first job out of college was selling radio advertising. So I actually sold for Cool 94.5 FM right out of college. So they were part of a cluster of stations. They owned Cool 94.5, Camel Country 108, 107.9 technically, and the Zone 101.5, which was an awesome alternative rock station back in the early 2000s.
There you go, Ethan.
And I wish it was still around. But so I sold radio advertising, and after doing that 2.5 years, I just had this itch to own my own business.
Oh.
But I didn't have a product or an invention to sell. And so I started looking like the franchise route.
Oh.
Well, if I don't have my own idea, but I feel like I have the skill set to sell something else. So I looked into that, but as a mid-20 something, I had maybe 50K in the bank. And so I found that most of the franchise opportunities, I either didn't have enough net worth, or I didn't have experience in the space. And so I found that difficult. So I ended up landing in insurance. And so I actually I had a State Farm insurance agency for a couple years in my mid-late 20s. And that was my first, kind of leap into, being my own business owner. Yes, I was captive for State Farm and I was selling their products, but for all intents and purposes, I was my own business owner. I mean, I had my own LLC. I was paying for my own, office space. I was paying employees, paying for all my own marketing.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Blue Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Blue Wave to get it done right the first time.
Just getting paid commissions for the products I was selling, but everything else was up to me. That was in August 2009 that I opened my business. So really tough time to be going into business for yourself. And I realized very quickly, probably first 12 months of that in the days that I remembered as a kid, where you had a local insurance agent, they might come to your house to have you sign some paperwork. You would consult them for information and guidance. Those days, for the most part, outside of maybe some smaller markets, I found in Phoenix that those days were gone. Insurance has turned into a commodity. People are just looking for the lowest price and access to online capabilities. So I found it really difficult to bring people in, have real conversations about, life insurance, things of that nature. And I had competitors every cardinal direction around me, within a 2-mile radius. So I ended up getting out of that. But I think, to get back to your question, I think I've been wanting to get back to, being in business for myself ever since then. But got stuck in the rat race of, working for companies, ever since then. And so about 2 years ago, I have a friend actually that I went to high school with who had followed some other paths in his career and ended up getting into business brokering in late 2019. And so in 2022, I actually looked to get into it, but just timing wasn't right. I had an opportunity come with the company I was working at the time, and the firm I was looking to join wasn't ready to bring someone on, didn't have the ability to train. So I kind of put it on pause, but basically from 2022 to last year, I had been thinking about, when is the right move, the right time to make this leap. And so, fortunately that came last year, but ultimately the desire that was driving me was this desire to get back into business for myself. And I tend to like things that keep me really busy and that are quite varied because I tend to get bored. And so with business brokering, I mean, there's always a new deal. You're working with different people in different industries, so it's never boring. Now, I may, look to specialize at some point, but at this point, we're working with businesses across all different sectors. So it's really interesting to learn how these businesses work and how they operate. And I enjoy that diversity.
So when you were going through that, and thank you, by the way, when you were going through that, I could hear that entrepreneurial spirit in you.
Yeah.
And so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, because, we see this on the show all the time, is once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. And those that go back and forth between the line of that, and not that there's anything wrong with this, but working in call it a steady Eddie or corporate job, it just seems like once you've had that taste for the risk and reward, it's hard to give that up. Would you describe that about yourself? And then I'm going to jump forward a little bit. That's part one of the question. And then part two is, has that now helped you see, which we're going to get into, your whole deal now, does it help you have a connection with those people?
Yeah. So I would say, yes, I think once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. I have an interesting personality, I feel, because there's this side of me that, like, I've said it to people before, like, I probably could have been really good in the military. Like, I have the ability to follow the right leadership. If I respect you and I believe you know what you're doing, I have no problem following your direction, and I can kind of fall in line, so to speak,
Right.
and follow rules, no problem. But there's this flip side of me that if it doesn't make sense or I don't agree with it, I push back. And I find that I hit that wall pretty much every time I'm working for somebody.
Okay.
And that can be good, but it can also create a lot of friction. And so, yeah, I think I think once you have been an entrepreneur and you get the taste of that opportunity, you can drive for yourself without any of the BS of a company telling you what the priorities are and telling you what you should focus on and telling you how you get paid. When you go into business for yourself, you have some more control over those things. So yeah, I think for me, that's spot on.
Okay. So let's jump into, what you're doing now with this business brokerage. Describe, before we get into all the questions, one of the things that we did on the onboarding was, and even before we got on the air, Justin had shared with me that he's helping, unlike what Jim was doing with where they do the M&A type stuff, you're on the Main Street business.
Yeah.
Again, for the audience's context, describe what falls into Main Street business versus, some of the other things that we've had on the show as far as the M&A on, let's say, construction or this or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think if you in the simplest terms, if you break it down into three categories, you have on the bottom end, and I don't mean that in a negative way.
Right.
You have Main Street business brokers, and they're handling transactions that would be $2 million or less. So
say $2 million. You're saying that is their annualized revenue, or is that their valuation?
Valuation.
Okay.
Yep. So really a Main Street business, it's an owner operator. So it's the guy who has had a restaurant back of house service business for 20 years. He raised his family on it. He's doing $150,000 a year, but he's doing the work 5 days a week. And so
7.
Yeah, more like 7. Yeah, for sure. It's hard work. Well, any business owner's pulling a lot of hours. But they're going to be selling that business to somebody who, usually based on cash flow, is going to be working in the business as well. There's just not enough cash flow to pay one or two managers, 100, 150, and then still have, revenue left over for yourself as the owner. So that's the area that I focus on, at least today.
Okay.
I can't tell you in 10 years what that's going to be. Then you have like your middle market. So that's I think this is a loose term. And I think if you asked 5 brokers, you might get 5 slightly different answers.
Right, but it's just in context of sidelines, right?
Yeah, it's going to be, a 3 to 5 million up to maybe 10 million.
Okay.
And so, like Jim is definitely probably more like if I recall from the podcast you did with him, he's not taking deals less than 5 mil.
No.
So he's definitely not playing in the space that I'm in, but he did. That's how he started off. I think a lot of times they do start off Main Street and you grow yourself into middle market or M&A. And then I would say above middle market is your pure M&A. I mean, these are tens of millions of dollars or more. And it's private equity firms are the big players. And, private equity is not buying the businesses in general that I'm selling. Maybe they would if they found, 15 good ones, and they rolled them all up. But for the most part, it's another owner operator that has a dream of entrepreneurship, right? Going back to that back of house restaurant service business, there's a guy or gal somewhere who's been working in restaurants for 15 years and is tired of it. Feels like they've got enough understanding of the industry. They've got enough connections that they could do something within that space. And they're ready to go off on their own and take that leap of faith. There's an accountant somewhere who has just been a CPA at a large firm and is like, you know what? I've been well trained. I have enough knowledge and experience that I think I can do this on my own, grow my own customer base and kind of call my own shots. And, again, it's hard to start something from scratch. Going back to my State Farm story, I started that agency from scratch in August 2009. So they called it was a new market opportunity is what they called it. But the slang for it within State Farm was scratch. And so I remember starting and some agent told me, make sure to take a screenshot of your system basically on day one because it'll say 0 policies in force. And one day you'll look back and you'll be able to see how much you've grown to and it'll be cool. You could frame it, whatever, like framing your first dollar you made. And so anyway, it takes a lot to get from that point.
So thank you. That I think that just, it sets the tone for the rest of the podcast. And because I know if I was listening or watching, I'd be like, oh, okay, now I get it. Thanks for doing that, Justin. Okay, now next question I'm sure everyone will want is like, okay, in the sense of the market right now, and we'll role play throughout the rest of this interview if you want, is it more, okay, you're representing more on the sell side, but on the buy side, are people, they're looking for upside potential. Mm-hmm. Is it more on service or product or both right now? Like give a sense of what you've seen over the last year as far as are there trends? Is it going up or down with product and service? I think everyone would kind of want to know that. Yeah.
I mean, my experience from what I'm seeing, at least what's coming through our door, the leads I'm getting, the deals I'm working, it mostly is service side, right. Is what I'm seeing. So
fast cash flow.
Yeah, exactly. And also there's a lot of recurring revenue models with that. It's a lot easier to buy a business where, there's 10, 15, 20 contracts in place with some recurring revenue than to come in and, you have to sell another widget, every day. So service is what I'm definitely seeing. And there seems to be, at least on the buyer side, again, I don't represent the buyers, but we obviously deal with a lot of buyers because you can't sell if you don't have a buyer.
Right.
And so, a lot of it tends to be kind of service interest is what I'm seeing.
Okay. What is the, again, in your space, what does the typical lead generation look like? In other words, when you get a call or solicitation, what does that first few hours look like, in that transaction? Or transaction is not the right word. In that first meet and greet. Mm-hmm. You can share that?
Yeah, well, first off, to get like really right at the beginning, I feel like, at least from what I see, I feel like a lot of business owners don't know what to do. I think and again, I'm not in their head and I'm not in that room when they're maybe started having that conversation with their spouse or business partner. But I think there's, in general, I feel like if you were to ask 100 people what a business broker is, I think most don't know. I think if you asked 100 people what a real estate agent is, you'd have a very high percentage understanding. Most people know probably 5 real estate agents, especially, post-housing, bursts and all that. Everybody became a real estate agent. But I think business brokering is one of those things that's a little bit of an unknown. So I feel like when somebody says to themselves, I think I'd like to sell my business, I think I'm at that point, I think they don't know where to turn. So a lot of times when I'm having that first engagement, there's a sense of cluelessness. There's this I don't really even know what to do. I happen to find you. I'm not even sure I know how, but start to guide me in this process. And so the first, interaction, in my opinion, is you're starting the relationship building. The process of selling a business, on average is 9 to 12 months. So you are locked arms for a while. And so there obviously has to be a fit there, but you're going to be interacting with this person for a while. And so at the beginning stages, I think, they need to understand who I am, what my background is, and I need to understand who they are. Why do they want to sell?
I was going to interrupt
Yeah.
you there. Is the why the biggest question that needs to get answered?
Yeah, because a lot of business owners so a business is such a personal thing that and there's so much emotion attached to it. I think a lot of times people think they're ready to sell, logically, their brain's telling them it's time to get out, it's time to move on. But emotionally, I think they're usually not quite ready. I think that's probably a longer process to come to than logically. And so, one of the first questions you ask is, outside of what was your gross revenue last year, and what do you do, is why do you want to sell? And you're really trying to get a real gut check from them,
An honest answer.
And you need an honest, clear answer right out of the gates. If that person panders and really is wishy-washy about it, that is one indicator that you might be in for some trouble or a difficult process actually getting this person to even a listing agreement, to be quite frank. So that is a big one. And so, perfect case scenario, right? They would say to you, well, Justin, my wife and I have run this business for 30 years and we've spent the last 24 to 36 months really thinking about it. All of our books are in order and the business is in a great place. We've grown revenue the last 3 years. We just know we're ready to retire. We've made that decision. That would be the perfect, if you could draw it up, but it's usually not how it works out. Yeah.
Well, listen, again, to give the audience, I think we need to go down that path. So with that, I'm going to ask you the tougher questions of you address the why, the how, not to belittle it, but again, with you and with an organization like Sunbelt, or whether we had Jim on here or a bunch of other business brokers, everyone's got kind of the roadmaps figured out. That's not the hard part, because those are check the boxes. They're workflows, right? As far as financials, this.
Yep.
Call it the underwriting, if you will. That seems pretty dialed in, but I know we're going to get into some things that you feel that could be changed and improved upon in the industry, because it has maybe been a little archaic. But let's go back to when you are asking the why. What do you see some of the biggest mistakes in the why?
I would say the big one is they've convinced themselves they're ready when they're not. They think that they're ready to retire and they're ready to start traveling, follow a hobby they've maybe had. But the reality is that their full identity is tied up in that business. And they've seen it. They've taken a vacation and been on their phone the entire time, been on their laptop the entire time, still working while they're supposed to be getting a week of relaxation. They're so intertwined emotionally and everything else in that business that they simply are not ready, and they've not given themselves enough time to be ready. So to me, that's the big one. I think the other one is, a lot of times you'll have people reach out to you and they want to sell because things aren't going well. They've seen sales decrease over the last 3 years. They're starting to get worried. Well, if I let it go another 2 years, I'm in an even worse situation. So I'm going to go find somebody to help me sell it. And that's not a good time to be selling. What I a lot of times will stress to sellers is I understand you're the seller, and obviously as a sell side business broker, I'm representing you in your best interest, but we have to be able to see things from the buyer's perspective. And it's like, if you were the buyer,
What
would you want to be buying a business that had seen 3 to 5 years of year-over-year decline? Like, there, even if you were, like, you're going to wonder why. Like, there's going to be some hard questions you're going to need to have answered because of that. So yeah, the fire sale thing is not a good one. And honestly, in last year, when we're asking for financials, we're still, we're asking for the last 3 years of financials, which still includes 2021. And unfortunately for a lot of people, there's still a COVID year on there.
Yeah.
Some people were able to bounce back, but some are still trying to get, that atrocity off their books. And so, for a lot of people, it's just not the right timing. And so trying to tell somebody, hey, the best decision for you is likely to try to run this thing for another 12, 24 months and do X, Y, and Z. And then we can talk. This is not a business where, you're trying to, push people to sell now. Sometimes the stars do align and everything, it is time for them to sign a listing agreement. And if we got the business listed in a couple of months, we're full steam ahead. But a lot of times you're saying, you probably need to wait. So
on that math, Justin, is, having been in this business a while and listened to a lot of what you're talking about, is that I would say a large percentage probably don't have their stuff in order.
Mm-hmm.
A large percentage is, like you said, something happens. I mean, there's tons of things. It's like financial duress, cancer, all those things that affect a mom and pop shop, right?
Yep.
With that, though, let's go back to that 9 to 12 month thing, that as you see it and you say, hey, listen, you got some positive things here, but we need you to stay at the helm for another 12 months. Are you doing as much coaching as you are brokering?
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Bleu, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Bleu to get it done right the first time.
Yeah, definitely. In some ways, I think what you have to be careful with that is making sure that you have the ability to coach them in the right ways. So I would say where we can provide some of that guidance and coaching, we can, should, and do. But I would say the other really important factor, at least as a broker, being in a real professional space, is kind of having a network of people who you might be able to bring in to do those things. So like, as an example, a guy that I know has a business coaching business. And so, it might behoove that owner more to talk to him than to be talking to me. So where I can, farm out and send them to, a business transaction attorney, a CPA,
right,
if they really need to get the books in order, a business coach if they need. Let's say we've identified that, with a 20% increase in sales over the next 18 months, where, we would be in a position where, their seller's discretionary earnings would be such that they could achieve the sale price they're wanting. It might make the most sense to steer them to a business coach to start talking about, maybe some product extensions, maybe some better marketing tactics to expand those sales. And if I feel like I'm equipped to give some of that advice, I absolutely will. But where I can pull in, partners, I'll do that as well, just so that they're getting, kind of the top quality advice, that they could possibly get.
So again, playing the percentages here, Justin, would you say that most of the people that you deal with, when they are ready to commit to trying to sell, that is it financial, leadership, or what's called sales and marketing? Kind of the three big buckets of defining, that next round of success. Would you say which one of the three do you typically see is the weakest of the Main Street companies as they're trying to sell?
Yeah, I mean,
financial, leadership, or the sales and marketing?
Well, I would say usually the sales and marketing.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of these companies. So when we put together, as an example, when we put together a business package, which there's different names for this, that, there's a SIM, confidential information memorandum, certified business review, confidential business review, all these names. But basically, when we package the business to go to market, and essentially we build the package that we're going to show and give to good qualified buyer prospects so they can comb through and see the details of the business. A lot of times, what we want to put in there ideally is, this is the marketing plan they have in place, and these are the different people they have selling for them. This is their business development plan. And a lot of times that doesn't exist. As an example, like, I was talking to a business owner in the kind of restaurant service space, and, he's built a business off, handshake deals and just his personality and personal relationship for a couple of decades. A lot of the contracts aren't fully in place. There's not really ever been a marketing team. There's no sales plan. He's just gone out and hustled. And, sure, a new owner, could likely come in and do the same thing, but man, does it help for them to have some sort of roadmap to follow, to be able to read and see that, you've employed, whether that person's still there or not, you've employed, a 30 per hour week business development manager, and they've been, doing this many calls per week, to these particular business segments to try to drum up new business. Like, to have some sort of roadmap to follow is super helpful, and it helps that person visualize what they could do to not only take that plan and roll with it, but expand upon that plan, because they can start to visualize, well, man, if this were my business, that's good and all, but I would hire 2 more people and I'd have them doing some social media marketing. And, how cool would that be if we did video once a week of this dirty job, whatever, but a lot of times none of that exists. It's literally been the owner just hustling.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's sometimes hard for a potential buyer to see, this future with that business if there's not more concrete things to sink their teeth into. So I would say that's the biggest lacking thing.
Would you also say that, again, in the markets that you're seeing, are the owners typically coming in with an idea that they're overvaluated or undervaluated? In other words, do they come in thinking they're all worth, 10 times EBITDA, and in essence, they're only 3, or something like that?
Yeah, they all most business owners believe that the value of their business far exceeds what the numbers are telling us.
Got it.
And so at the end of the day, right, as a broker, if you specialize in a particular industry, you're going to have a pretty decent idea of multiples. If you have just a long history of experience selling across a number of industries, you're going to have some really good historical data there for what you've sold businesses for. But ultimately, we rely on databases. I think, Jim mentioned in his interview that, they're spending 6 figures a year just on access to databases and information. And so it's important for us to access these databases to get historical transaction data. And so essentially, these companies are recording transactions that have happened across different industry categories, and it's all recorded by NAICS or SIC code. And so, you go in and, as a broker, you're trying to, really get it as close as you can to, what the particular business is that you're representing. But ultimately, we rely on that data, and that gives you some directional guidance as to what the multiples are going to be. The software that I use that was actually developed by Len also gives us the ability to have some customization. So there are, about a handful of questions that we'll ask that business owner, and based on those responses, it will tailor that market multiple, even beyond the data we got from our databases. But in general, a Main Street business on average sells for, about 2 to 2.5 times SDE.
Yeah.
And so, but when you've got a business owner telling you in the first valuation meeting that they believe it's 6 to 8, and you've got no data to back that up, you're faced with one of 2 decisions. Either A, you walk from the deal. I guess 3 options. A, walk from the deal. B, work to get them back down to reality, which can be a really difficult thing to do. Or C, you just say, well, we'll take a floater here. Let's go ahead and let's put it out at 6 times. and we'll see what happens. At the end of the day, the market is going to dictate. But I think a good business broker is doing as good a job as they can on the front end of making sure they're not just putting floaters out into the market. Because if you do that, you're pretty much setting yourself up for downward negotiations, right? The only place is down if you've severely overvalued it.
Yeah.
And it's going to take extra time. And, the last thing you want is to sign a listing agreement at $1 million, because at that point you've got the business owner thinking, all right, I'm going to sell for $1 million. And if the process involves slowly chopping that down to whatever it ends up being, that's not a great experience for the seller at all. And so I really try to do everything that I can on the front end to get as accurate as possible. Now, it's not a business appraisal, and we state up front that it's a broker's opinion of value of the most probable selling price. So it's not, there's no guarantees in it, but we do try to be as accurate as we can. So ultimately, by the time we're signing a listing agreement, we, the broker, should feel confident in that listing price. The seller should feel really confident in it, and hopefully the market is relatively accepting of it. And we've been somewhere right in the ballpark. I think that's the ideal scenario.
Okay. Let me go down a couple other avenues here for you. Are you finding that the buyers are asking for owner carry, or do they still want them involved in the business?
Yeah, so I think both. I think one of the things, so when I have my valuation conversation after I've taken the time to actually run the broker's opinion of value, and we're sitting down to talk about those details, I always have the conversation about seller carry. And what I'll usually do, so my software will actually run some scenarios and I'll run 2 scenarios. A, if the buyer were to do, like a SBA 7A loan, here's what those find. Which is very common, yeah. And actually, a little tangent on that, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll reach out to an SBA partner and I'll see if I can get it pre-approved. But I'll include the numbers for what the numbers would look like if that person were to get an SBA, which is typically going to be 80% finance, 20% down, and right now you're going to be somewhere in the kind of 9% range, and it's a 10-year loan. You can refinance it or pay it off early, but the numbers look very good when you're taking it over 10 years. But ultimately, we want those numbers to look good. We want the ROI to look good. We want the payback period to be good. And obviously the SBA lender is going to have requirements on, how quickly that debt can be paid back. But then the flip side is the seller carry. And it's what we're trying to do early on is plant this seed that, it might be required even with an SBA loan involved, but have you ever considered actually carrying a percentage of this as a note directly with the buyer? And I think what sometimes people don't realize is that, I think they get so concerned with wanting everything right away, right up front, but there's an opportunity there to, actually have payments coming in for a period of time.
There's tax consequences too, yeah.
Exactly. Maybe it behooves you, and you got to talk to your CPA, but maybe it behooves you to not have that lump sum coming in right away. And so to spread that out with seller carry could be beneficial. Also, at just the simplest form, I'll say to them, hey, if you carry, the interest you're earning on this over 3 to 5 years pays for my commission. So ultimately your take home is higher because you become, the lender, so to speak, the seller national bank, we call it. At the end of the day, making them aware of it as an option is important in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it's absolutely their choice. And we will even say if they've agreed to consider it, we'll put language in the listing online that says, seller financing available at the sole discretion, of the seller. And so we're not committing to it up front, but we're saying we're willing to have a conversation about it.
Got it. You mentioned commission. You don't do this for fun. You do it for.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, you're a for-profit organization.
Correct. Yes.
So just educate everyone again. How typically does the commissions? You don't have to get into that, but how does the structure work?
Yeah, so we like to use the word success fee,
Yep.
or a transaction fee. It is a commission at the end of the day. But yeah, we charge a percentage of the sale price. And so it's typically going to be a fixed percentage up to $1 million. Once it exceeds $1 million, we're typically on a double Lehman scale. Yeah, so it's just going to tier down for every kind of $1 million segment. And obviously, like everything, things are negotiable. But yeah, we don't get paid until we're actually at closing and money is exchanged.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So now this can vary. Like I know
And
for Jim being in the M&A space, he's got retainers and things like that.
Yeah, on the bigger deals, with all the due diligence, you
Yeah.
have retainers. And
Yeah, for sure. But at least on the Main Street side, we're not charging anything up front. So we're putting in a decent amount of upfront time just to earn the business. And really, goal number one is to, if everything aligns, as a broker, you're trying to get to the point where you have a signed listing agreement, an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, for a year. And then that's where the real work begins, right? You're packaging the business, you're getting it up for sale, and you're really taking that person all the way to the closing table, hopefully. And then, it isn't until then that we actually see our fee, unless we've negotiated something else, or maybe, in some cases, we might turn down a deal and say, but we're happy to put together a marketing package for you. So we'll package the business and then you can put it up online yourself, whatnot. But for the most part, exclusive listing agreement, and success fee paid when we actually sell the business. So the big thing there, right, is that as opposed to when I was selling radio, you were asking for thousands of dollars to be paid, and all you could guarantee was that this ad will run at these times.
that's it.
The rest of it, we're just going to see what happens. Good luck.
Commensurate with the market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we were still getting paid. We were charging for that airtime. And with what we do, we are very much, our goals are aligned, because if I can't get that business sold, I'm potentially in it for a lot of hours of work with nothing to show for it. So we definitely are aligned. And it's just a matter of making it happen.
These next few questions kind of are going to dovetail. You'll follow. I'm leading the witness here, but back to trends and verticals. Okay, again, in the space that you play and the markets that you typically attract, what are you seeing as far as trends in? We talked a little bit about service recurring revenue, but I think the audience would love to hear some of the more nuanced verticals that are out there.
Well, so in my experience, I've seen manufacturing, and that could be manufacturing just about anything. It could be, aerospace parts, automotive parts. Home services is big there. And I don't claim to be an expert in, private equity and what's going on in the home services space, but there certainly seems to be a lot of interest in, on the private equity side, it's trying to scoop up, big HVAC companies, big plumbing companies. So I actually think there's huge opportunity for anybody with a business in that space who has done well, whether that's selling to a local company that wants to just add more headcount and just add a book of business, or obviously if there's a private equity opportunity, that's not the space I play in. But home services is huge. Insurance is actually a great one. And I personally, am very comfortable with that space because I have sold in it. So I understand the lingo, I understand how it works, but insurance is highly attractive because of the residual income. There's just not a lot of sales opportunities where you continue to get paid for something so long as they don't leave. And so we tend to get a lot of interest anytime there's an insurance agency for sale. Tends to be more so on the independent side. You've got people who could be based anywhere and they're just looking to scoop up more policies, and they've got the infrastructure to service it. But it's a little bit of a different beast when you're selling, a captive where they have to be kind of underneath that brand. That's definitely a different ball game. But there's a lot of desire for that just because of the residual side of it. And then, CPA accounting firms are kind of tried and true. People have to do their taxes. If you build a nice little book of business of people who have you do their tax filings every year, you could build a nice little business and, doing $1 million a year as one person with a couple admin staff. So those are some of the big ones that I've seen. I know construction is a big one. I have not, dealt with any construction myself personally. But that's certainly a sought after vertical within the broker space that I'm aware of.
Well, and so you touched on a bunch of things, but the one thing I wanted to go into a little bit was, and again, I was leading the witness and you did a great job of framing all that, was are the PE firms, the VCs, the large family offices, are they now coming, let's use the comparison of what you're doing versus what Jim was talking about. Is that market saturated enough that now they're not coming down to your level? That I don't.
Yeah, no, I can
understand.
Yeah,
but I think the audience would like to know is like, hey, are they now dabbling in these things? So like when you represent a seller and you go out, back to the database discussion, which we'll get into in the last, the tech part of our conversation, is, are you finding that, in the old days or even a year ago, zero pings from a family office or zero pings from let's say a smaller capitalized PE firm. Now they're going, no, let's go look here now.
Yeah.
That happening?
Yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity. I think there's probably a lot of untapped opportunity and potential in the Main Street side. There are a lot of bad Main Street businesses. There are a lot of people you look.
There's a lot of bad any kind of business,
exactly,
but there's a lot of good ones too.
For sure, and I think that sometimes gets overlooked. I think it's easy to think when you think Main Street and you understand the definition of that, you just think kind of small little podunk businesses, but you've got some legitimate, husband and wife business, whatever, run businesses that have been generating excellent cash flow for years, and they live in a beautiful home. They've raised multiple kids. They're taking great vacations when they can actually get the time. They are beautiful little businesses. They're very comfortable. Yeah. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for private equity to find a great opportunity within that space, which conversely means there's an opportunity for these business owners to potentially, find that. I think, what I find with the Main Street owners, and this is probably owners of all sizes, but in the Main Street side, in particular, there tends to be, not always, but a lot of times there can be this, like they've created an image in their mind of like who's going to buy their business. And they're like, they almost don't want to sell to certain people. They like, we want to sell to this profile. Like we want this person to have their own kids and we want to know that they're going to take care of it, as opposed to just like wanting the cash and running. So I think, with PE, you can definitely get into some more interesting scenarios of, maybe needing to stay on for a few years, which sometimes is a goal and sometimes is not a goal. So I think you got to obviously find that alignment. But yeah, I think there's opportunity for sure on both sides.
I think you brought up another thing, Justin, is at least through my eyes when I see it more on the construction side, but I have a feeling you'll validate this too, is with our human capital constraints that are in the market right now. I think the buy, sell, the M&A, call it what you want, all those things, is people are looking beyond the dollar now. They're looking at the human capital side going, they're not making any more whatever, fill in the blank, aerospace engineers or plumbers or, I could go on and on and on. So the only way we're going to grow this and capture future market share is by doing these kind of deals.
Yeah.
And so back to the mom and pop that maybe had created a great culture. They were steady eddies. They just didn't want to go through their own glass ceiling because they were comfortable, right? But that is very attractive for a buyer that sees the larger picture, understands the market better, understands the global market better, where they can go, hey, we'll give you fair price. And it's going to be better than what you probably did if you were staying where you're at.
Yeah.
But a big part of it is capturing the human capital.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that can, absolutely ruin a new acquisition is losing all of that human capital and having a mass exodus. And yeah, I mean, we had some plumbing work done last summer at our house, and I was talking to the guy, and he's been with that plumbing company for like a dozen years. And I would imagine if you got in a little bit deeper, you'd see that they have probably multiple plumbers who have been working at this shop for a long time, right? It's like Susan and John run it and still are a part of the day to day, and they feel valued, and they're kept busy, and the jobs are interesting that they get to go on. Insurance agencies are a great example. I mean, some of the if you were to call. Honestly, quite frankly, any agency right now, you are most likely not going to talk to the actual agent. You will talk to one of the service guys or gals working in that office. And if you were to peel back the onion on some of these agencies, they've got somebody, multiple people who have been there 10, 15 years. They know the system in and out. They know all the customers. When somebody needs to, buys a new car and needs to take the SUV off and put the new whatever, they call Susie. Hey, Susie, we just got a new vehicle. Would you mind, quoting me on that? And so to pick up a firm that's got that type of human capital is huge, because you can't teach that stuff overnight. Like that's a process. And so that kind of tenure is worth its weight in gold.
All right. In the last segment here, we wanted to touch on tech.
Yeah.
With that, I'm not gonna lead you on here. I'll kind of say that we rarely have a conversation on this podcast where we're not talking about the advancements in AI or tech or something to augment the inefficiencies in everyone's verticals. Be humble. Talk about what you see in yours and what you think are opportunities coming forward.
Yeah. So this space is interesting in that the average age of a broker, from what I have read, is about 55 years old. And so I think number one, I think the industry, I think there's a ton of value in that expertise. Somebody like Jim, you can't buy 30, 35 years of experience. That comes with time.
Yep.
And the number of deals that guy has seen and the level of expertise he can bring to the table is invaluable. But Jim's going to probably want to retire at some point. And so, I hope to see a new generation of brokers, coming in, in their 40s who've got 20 years to be the next Jim Afinowich or whoever else, or Len Crick. But I think with that, again, I use that demographic because a lot of these guys started in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And case in point, the gentleman who trained me, kind of mentored me, I had access right out of the gates to one of the most comprehensive soup to nuts plans for how to be a business broker you could ever possibly want. But a lot of it was archaic, so from the PowerPoint Excel based, quoting platform to, manual automation of NDAs with new buyer prospects through basically templated emails in Outlook, to everything in between. I think this industry is ripe for, not only some youth and a next generation, but also some technological advancement. And I think a couple of key areas where I hope we'll see more of this, and I'm not saying none of this exists today.
I'm sure it does.
I just know that it's not readily, in my
not as
opinion,
fast as some other industries.
yeah, not as fast and definitely not as readily available as some other sectors where, you have your choice of, like if you want to have social media management, you have no less than 30 different options for a platform that will help you, schedule and automate all your posting and all that. But I think it's ripe for some better valuation tools that have, and there has been one, actually my employing broker has used it. They've rolled up with another company though, so I don't actually know fully where that stands now. But it's got, I told you earlier, we subscribe to these databases for transaction data. It had it all built in. So you're doing your valuation. It's got it built in the back end, all this data for these comparable transactions. So you enter in your, NAICS code, your SIC code, and it's automatically pulling that data in the background to help you with your market multiple. And it's got built-in AI tools to help you create your SIM or your CBR. So you can key in kind of some basic information about that business, and then it's referencing ChatGPT and these other things to build a comprehensive SIM. And I think as that continues to get better, so long as the output is high quality, the amount of time that will save a broker, I would say in some cases it could take upwards of a month to go from listing agreement to actually having that business package ready to go and ready to present to the market, especially depending on how complex it is. With the new technology we have at our fingertips, you could have that done in a couple of days, which means you're able to get that seller's business to market quicker, which sometimes can mean a lot, right? If you're delaying a month, that might, mean 3, great buyer prospects already bought something else. I mean, you just don't know.
True.
So I think valuation side, the SIM or CBR creation side, I think can be a lot faster and better. And then I think just automation of the busy tasks that you have to deal with. So as an example, you go live with a deal and it's live, it's listed for sale, you immediately start getting buyer prospect inquiries. Well, there's a process that you have to go through. Confidentiality is key in our business. And right out of the gates, when you list something, 9 times out of 10, it's generic. You're not listing the owner's name, the name of the business. Generally, the buyer knows it's in this sector and you've given like the highlights. And buyer prospects have to earn the right to see the actual CBR. And so they've got to sign an NDA right out of the gates. And so, I mean, imagine you're a broker doing high volume and you've got 5 listings and each of them is getting 5 to 10 inquiries a week, how are you going to manage that? Everyone needs an NDA. Like, are you seriously going to be manually sending like a personal message and a request for an NDA? Like, no, that all has to be happening behind the scenes. You shouldn't really be stepping in until a buyer prospect has checked, boxes A, B, C, and D. And now you're like, all right, let's schedule a call to talk about this business more. But you're not doing that with every inquiry because you get a lot of shoppers.
Yeah.
You get a lot of people who, honestly, I have people all the time who are like, yeah, so what business was this again? Because they've blasted out to, 20 different businesses and they can't even keep track of what they've, what they're reaching out about, which is, looks unprofessional, but.
All right. In the few minutes we have left, what's the question I didn't ask you and that you want to share? Like, what's something that I didn't tap into that you really want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, putting on the audience hat and thinking about, the business owner who's listening to this and has maybe been doing that soul searching for the last however much time with their business partner, their spouse, to determine if they want to sell their business. I would say, the metaphor I would use is if you wanted to get in shape, you certainly could do it on your own. You could look up your own meal recipes. You could look up your own exercises, motivate yourself to go to the gym and do it. But there's a reason people hire trainers, somebody to keep you accountable, motivated, and help take you from where you're at today to your end goal, whatever that might be. And I would say for us, that's really the role we play. We're kind of that personal trainer. I would say if you're thinking about selling your business, look for a professional who can help guide you. Our job is to do a lot of the heavy lifting, help make sure you're doing the right things at the right time, and ultimately quarterback the entire thing. Because at the end of the day, even if you're selling the business, you don't actually exit it till you sell it. You're still operating the business until then. And so you have to make sure you are still focused on the health and growth of the business you're currently working in. And if that's what you want to do, that's what you want your focus to be, you can't be managing buyer inquiries and all that stuff. That's where we step in. So I would say just like do your due diligence, but like don't try to feel comfortable reaching out, have a few conversations. It shouldn't necessarily start and end with me. You should have several conversations to find that right fit. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of value because this might be one of the most important decisions you make outside of like when you bought your house or something like that,
Well, Justin, I can't thank you enough. And for that, again, Justin Turner with Sunbelt Network. He's easily accessible on all the social media platforms and Google the hell out of him. So, Justin, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
You've been listening to the Mac and Blue Show, brought to you by Blue Wave General Contracting. Be sure to subscribe to the Mac and Blue podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Follow JJ Levinsky on LinkedIn and Instagram. Tune in every Monday